Are you overwhelmed by motherhood and barely keeping your head above water? Are you confused and frustrated by how all the other moms make it look so easy? You can't figure out how to manage the chaos in your mind, your home, or your family. I get you, mama. Parenting with ADHD is hard. Here is your permission slip to let go of the Pinterest-worthy visions of organization and structure fit for everyone else. Let's do life like our brains do life, creatively, lovingly, and with all our might. When we embrace who we are and how our brains work, we can figure out how to live our lives successfully and, in turn, lead our families well. At the end of the day, we just want to be good moms. But, spoiler alert, you are already a great mom. ADHD does not mean you're doomed to be a hot mess, mama. You can rewrite your story from shame spiral to success story. And I'll be right here beside you to cheer you on. Welcome to Motherhood and ADHD. Hey there, Successful Mama. It's your friend, Patricia Sun. While I am on break for the next few weeks, I am bringing you some friends. This is my Best of Friends episode, and these are all interviews that I've done for other people's podcasts. First of all, thank you to these hosts for sharing their episode with us. And I want you to go in the show notes and see, where do you find them? Go listen to their other episodes. Put their show in your queue, in your download list, so that you have an extra friend to hang out with when you're cleaning or on a walk or riding in the car. Every time I am interviewed, I find myself often sharing very similar things, but there's always some nuances and new things that, oh my, wow, I have never shared that before. I've never talked about this in this way. And I can't wait for you to get a new flair and perspective and a new podcast friend to join you today. So listen in to this episode on a friend's podcast. Go check them out and enjoy this Best of Friends episode. Meet Tami Hackbarth of the 100% Guilt-Free Self-Care Podcast.
100% Guilt-Free Self-Care with Tami Hackbarth, the podcast here to remind you that you matter too. I am so happy to have you here. I feel like we could talk forever because we have so much in common. We only see each other once a year. I was recently on your show and we had so much to talk about. So my friend Patricia, please tell my listeners who you are and what you do in the world.
I am Patricia Sung, and I am an ADHD coach for moms who have ADHD themselves. So I focus specifically on moms. So yes, I do talk about parenting because by nature, it's part of our jobs. But really where I focus in on is you as a parent, as a mother, as a human. What do you need in order to live well, especially with ADHD in the mix? How do you love your life and still get things done and not feel like a hot mess, train wreck of a human every day? And be able to do all the cool dreams that you wanted to do and feel like you're showing up as a cool mom and getting things done and raising humans to be great people eventually. And I do that through courses, community, coaching. I have in-person retreats. So I do all the things so that you can feel special. That's what I do.
I love that because our work holds all of our hands. We are linked arms. We do so much of the same work. How did you come to decide, I got to really target the moms that have ADHD? What was that pivotal moment where you're like, these are my people, other than being a mom with ADHD, like we both are? Why did you decide to make this your area of specialty?
So it started when I had my first. So my oldest is 9. And I was up at 3 a.m. Googling, how do you be a good mom with ADHD? I think he was probably like 2 or 3 weeks old. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected. This is a hot mess. Send in the cavalry. This is hard. And I don't want to do it anymore. I legitimately, my son was about 2 weeks old and I turned to my husband, dead serious. I was not joking. I was like, can we send him back? Can we send him back? I just want my old life back. Please, can we start over? Can we redo? And of course, he's staring at me like, oh, you're kidding. And I was like, nope, not kidding. And he was like, this is not good. And so thankfully I did start seeing a therapist and the doctors and the medicine that we pulled on out of that postpartum anxiety. But it was really, really hard. And if I look back at my life, you can see the ADHD all along the way. I didn't get diagnosed until college when I went from being National Honor Society. I was in college on an academic scholarship, fell apart, almost failed out, almost got kicked out. It was a hot mess. And that's when I got diagnosed. Thankfully, I had a doctor who recognized it back in the year 2000. So you know how old I am now. Like, I really thought though, like back then, it was just like, this affects your schoolwork and take this Ritalin when you have to study and you'll be okay. And that was not true. Yes, the medicine did help. No, it did not only affect schoolwork. And so I figured out how to make things work. I duct taped some things, spitballed it, made it work until even through like when I was teaching, I used to teach middle school. I figured out how to make it all work. I loved the structure of middle school because it told me exactly what to do, where to be, when to do it. Lovely. But I get to motherhood and all of a sudden, all of that structure that I had placed in my life just went out the window because all of a sudden it's on you're on the schedule of this tiny thing that has no sense of time, even worse than me, I suppose. And it was just falling apart. And I realized like, wow, this isn't this is not good. I need help. And here I am Googling and can't find anything. Literally, it was like one article on scary mommy. And I think in total, I'd found 3 articles talking about being a mom with ADHD, and they were mostly just complaining and venting about how it was hard, and I couldn't find any resources to do something about it. Now, I can look back now, like, I've met some fabulous ladies who have been working in this field a long time. Clearly, the Google was not in their favor that day, nor mine, but there just wasn't the resources there that we needed, and so you fast forward, my youngest was about a year old, and I am a Christian, and very clearly, God was like, "This is what I want you to do. I want you to make a podcast for moms with ADHD." And I was like, "Absolutely not. I'm out, God. This is not for me. No, thank you. Mm-mm. No, this sounds terrible. You want me to go put all of my problems on the internet for everyone to hear? I don't even listen to podcasts. What are we doing here?" And I ignored it for several months, and then over time, thankfully that God stuck with me and was like, "No, really, this is what I want you to do." I was like, "Ah, okay." So I went to YouTube University, figured out how do I make a podcast, and started. And that was 5 years ago. And pulling that all together, like I can see where it all makes sense now. At the time, did not make any sense whatsoever. But I can look back now and see how little Patricia struggled and how my experience through working through my own diagnosis and then working with so many students who have ADHD as a teacher. I'm an entrepreneur. I have more than one company, and I started my first business when I was 12. I can see that how that experience has come together. And all of a sudden, it's like all these pieces of me have come together to here. Where like I honestly thought after I had my kids, I'd just go back to teaching and probably go get a degree, like a advanced degree, and go into administration. And I won't get on my soapbox today, but there's something to be said about a lot of teachers who become administrators and don't really. Those skills are not very transferable. Being a really great teacher does not make you a really great administrator. And a lot of people who are not very good at teaching then become administrators, also still not good. And that's where I really thought I was going to make my difference, is staying in the education world. And lo and behold, here I am still in education. I'm constantly educating families, but I know now that all that stuff that I saw as a teacher, I can actually affect change here with mom. And, I think it may have been you who said, like, we're not doing generational, like, we're not breaking generational cycles, we're rebuilding them.
Yeah,
Um,
we're not only cycle breakers, but we're cycle starters.
right. And that's what I get to do with my work now, is help families change the course of what's happening in their lives. Because right now, mom is crying in the bathroom, scrolling her phone, ignoring all the problems, or literally like yelling her face off at everyone because nobody understands and she's overwhelmed and can't handle any more things. Do not ask me for one more snack. I will cut you. Like this level of anger and like just sheer overwhelm. Like brain has shut off. We're in high stress mode. Nothing useful is coming out of this mouth. I really just need to go hide. But I can't because I got kids here and I got to still keep them alive. But also, what damage am I causing? Would they be better off not? I mean, it's just like all that awfulness starts swirling around your head and you think that you're stuck this way. And I want moms to know you are not stuck this way. Yes, being a parent is hard. Having ADHD is hard. And there's still something we can do about it. We don't have to stay in that place of the yuck and the overwhelm and the trauma and the drama and all that. There is hope to do life in a different way. And I hope that I can be that lighthouse for other moms to see that there is an option out there and we can shift the way that our family runs every day. And we don't have to be perfect about it, but we can really make some big differences.
Oh my God, you guys see why me and Patricia totally hit it off? Like we sat down next to each other at a conference and I was like, oh, love her. Because I kept saying, oh yeah, me too. And
Oh,
at the
yeah.
time that we met, I hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD yet, even though I was in my 50s. And like you, I had pieced together what worked. And when things stopped working, I was like, you know what? Let's hyper focus on fixing this particular thing. And I
How
really,
many self-help books did you read in that?
I have literally hundreds of books right
Yep.
here, and I've read them all, so you don't have to. And I pulled out the relevant pieces and I put them all together. And I'm like, if you took, I'm going to Frankenstein your exercises that you get because I'm like, oh, that's ailing you. Let me pull 3 exercises from 3 different books. And this is the background of this and the background of that. And people are like, how do you do that? I'm like, a lifetime of trying to figure out how I, as a neurodivergent person, can live in a world that was not made for me. Having this conversation with my ADHD daughter this morning, I was like, honey, there's nothing wrong with you, but you were born into a world that was not made for you. So what steps do we have to take so that we can move through this life in the least painful way possible?
Yeah.
And hopefully change the world so that it is made for everyone and it
Mhm.
supports everyone.
Yeah.
And oh my God. So if you're sitting here and you're like, I don't have ADHD, why am I listening to you? Well, here's the thing. When I had students that had ADHD, we always had to have the talk of it's not an excuse. It's not a like, oh, well, you can't do that. It was the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. And the conversation went like this. Okay, so if this way that we have set it up doesn't work for you, what do we need to modify or accommodate to make this work for you? Right. And like that framework can be applied across the board regardless of how your brain works. It's like, how does it make it happen? So you have group coaching programs. Are all of the people that you work with, are they like officially diagnosed? Do you have some ADHD curious people? And or do you also have moms who don't have ADHD themselves, but are parenting ADHD kids? Because that is fancy parenting. That's like graduate
Yeah.
level parenting. I mean, I can't imagine parenting a neurodivergent kid without also being neurodivergent. Cause I'm like, that shit's hard, but I get her at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
So tell us more about your community and what people will find when they go check out your work.
So my stance is that if what I'm doing helps you, come on. Like there are, I would say it's probably like half and half of moms who have been diagnosed and moms who suspect. If like I always say, like, what's that saying? If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck. Like if you're sitting here going like, man, Patricia and Tami, like they're my jam. I'm just gonna let you know right now, there's a good chance you should just go head over my website and get that checklist of symptoms and like how like we flock together. And it's not to say that you won't have any friends who are neurotypical. But if you are like really resonating with so many people who have ADHD, like that in itself is like diagnosis flag of like, hey, maybe this is something that you could look into. And as well as when your kids have ADHD, there's like a 75% chance that they got it from their parents.
Someone. They got it from
And
someone.
somewhere, and if not, then I'll look up at those grandparents, those aunts and uncles, like it's in the blood. Not really, it's not actually in the blood, but like it is tied to your hereditary-ness, if you will. So
Yes.
it came from somewhere. Yes, I always like find myself being like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. I always say like, well, you can't just get ADHD. Well, technically you could, like you can have a head injury and then have ADHD, but like the amount of people who have ADHD via head injury is slim. Most of us got it from our family tree somewhere along the way. And
Yeah, absolutely. And the first time I heard that came out of a doctor's mouth as I'm sitting in an ADHD parenting class, and nary a person in that room was sitting still. And it's like 8:00 at night, and the doctor's like cracking open Coke Classic and guzzling it down. And she's like, guess what? Me too. And we're like, wow, really shocking.
Yeah, it is.
She's like, I brought up the wiggle seats for all of you.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, most of the moms in my community either have it or suspect it. And it is not like I don't check for your diagnosis paperwork to be a part of that. Not at all. Like I want that if I have things that are going to help you, please come and use them. Make your life easier. But what you'll find when you get there is I'm very balanced between both the logical things like strategies and tools and how do we actually make this happen? Like, tell me what to do, or don't tell me what to do, but tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. Like, I navigate that space in between very well.
They give me a
Uh,
framework that I can improve upon for myself.
yes. Like,
Yes,
that's actually what
same.
I want. I want you to take everything that I hand you and you say, good, garbage, throw it out. Okay, keep that. And I want you to take all these pieces and then make them work for you. I don't expect anyone to show up and do it exactly like I did. And quite honestly, if you do, it's probably not going to work. Like, it's just, that's the reason why we go to Pinterest and download the chore chart and then it doesn't work. And we're like, why can no one in my family follow the chore chart? Because it was built for somebody else. And we want that easy answer, but that's not how life works and it's not how ADHD works. Unfortunately, I really wish I could just hand you this Pinterest chart chart and be on your way. But I want you to have that, all those pieces, like the structure and like, these are the things that I've seen work for people. But honestly, like if I give you 10 ideas, I don't need you to have 10 good ideas. I only need one of them to work for you. Like I want you to find the one that made sense. Or maybe you take this one and that one and kind of cobble it together and, have one of those like, little hybrid babies. Like come up with what works for you because I'm not the one who has to live with this every day. So take the pieces, make it work for you. So that's one half is the like tangible, what are we gonna do about this? The other half is the intangible things. Like we do a lot of work with emotional regulation and understanding like why is it that I lose my wait, am I allowed to swear on here? Is that okay?
Of course you are.
Okay.
Fuck. I just marked every episode.
Okay, I just want to make sure no one's gonna be upset. Oh, I should have had my headphones in. Okay.
No.
Like if I don't want you to get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, like I literally lose my shit on my kids every day at 7 p.m. What's going on? Like that piece of the emotional regulation and the energy regulation of being able to have the stamina to do all the things that we are required as parents to do. Like it's a lot. And I want you to know that there are also ways that we can rearrange things and do things to make that work. But I want you to understand that piece too, is that when you are, disassociating or spending half the day scrolling your phone or yelling at everybody, especially like when it gets close to your cycle, like when these things are affecting your day to day a lot and frequently, then we want to do something about it. And I think that's a lot of times where people don't get diagnosed with ADHD because they're like, well, everybody gets mad at their kids sometimes. Everybody yells at their kids sometimes. Everybody gets frustrated in homework sometimes. And when your sometimes is actually most of the time or many times a day, then that struggle is on a different level. And it's the same thing with like, oh, well, everybody loses their keys. Everybody, forgets to return the permission slip at school sometimes. It's like, yeah, but you forgot one permission slip all year and I forgot 7 of them. That's a different struggle. So I want moms also to then understand the ADHD and see all the ways that it's affecting you because I describe ADHD like a filter. It's a filter on the picture. It's not changing who you are. Like you having ADHD doesn't mean that you now have different colored eyes. You're still the person who loves art or, loves, team sports or board games or singing in the shower. Like those are all things that are still you, but your ADHD puts a filter on it. So it is modifying the way that it looks or the way that it seems to show up, but it's not fundamentally changing who you are. You're still you. But that ADHD sure is going to affect every little snippet, every corner, every nugget of your life because it is not just when I was a kid, they just thought it was, it's a school problem.
For more
Once you graduate,
resources,
don't worry.
classes,
No,
and community,
that's not
head
how it
over
works.
to my website,
So when
Motherhood
you have
ADHD.com.
unmanaged ADHD, especially you come from a family of people who have been undiagnosed and have unmanaged ADHD, there's a lot of unhealthy patterns there. There's a whole lot of traumas and dramas, and we don't have to stay like that. So I want you to understand how does it work? What does it mean when you're stressed out? How does that affect your life? Well, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? Because a lot of the advice that's out there, like you said, it's like, there's just so much other, like, it didn't work for you. And I think that's a lot of times where moms will get diagnosed, because they're like, but I've tried all the things. I have downloaded all the Pinterest chore charts, and I read all the books, and I did all the things that the school told me to do, and it's still not working, because we're not looking at it with, like, through the lens of ADHD and fitting it to what you need. And that emotional piece is really hard when you're the one yelling at your kids every night, 4 days in a row, and then you feel like an awful mom, but you don't wanna tell anyone about it, because what if they take my kids? CPS will come. It's just a whole thing. And, I say it lightly, but it's not. It's really serious, and there are moms struggling everywhere with this shame and guilt that comes with trying to hold it all together, trying to mask, trying to, duct tape and spitball it together so that you can give your kids a good life, and yet you're the one falling apart trying to keep it all together. Like, we don't have to live like that. We don't have to hate what we're doing and feel like we never succeed at anything, and how come I can never get this habit in place, or how come I can do the habit for 2 months and then something changes and it's like I never even had a habit in the first place. Like, when you understand why your brain does things the way it does, then you start to find the solutions that fit you. Because I love looking at the patterns. Being like, okay, well, if you're struggling here, how is that familiar? What else do you see? Can we find any patterns? It's like, even just like the other day, one of my clients was like, well, I really need to, like, my doctor said, like, I really need to start moving more. But she's like not excited about it. Obviously, I mean, most of us aren't when we hear that news. And she's like, I don't know. Like, I can't figure out how to make this work. And like, by the time we worked through the question, we were at like, one of the problems was like, she didn't have socks clean to go on the walk. And like, she kept her shoes by the door, but it was like, well, why can't I just go do the walk? And it's like, we literally got to like making sure she had a clean pair of socks. That was like her thing. She was like, I was like, if you have dirty socks from like the day before, like, and they're sitting there with your shoes, like, is that a deal breaker? She's like, no, I think I could wear the socks twice, but I don't want to wear the dirty socks from like previous things. Like, if they're like designated walk socks, it's okay. But like, if they were yucky socks from before, I don't want to do it. It's like, okay, well, most people, when they think about like, you need this like exercise habit or movement habit, they're not looking at, oh, we need socks. Socks is going to be the domino that solves this problem. Socks are the domino. Socks are the domino. So you have to like, I want to figure out like, what's the pattern and the obstacle here to get to like, we solved the sock problem and now she's walking every day at lunch. Like, what?
Girl, neurotypical people are like, what the fuck? But I'm going to tell you what, I joined a gym years ago specifically to do weight training. And I was like, why am I not doing it? Why am I not doing it? Why am I not doing it? Do you know what the answer I finally came up with is? For the first time, it was a gym that their weight room had a wall of mirrors. And I hated how my body looked in a sports bra. And so I was like, was that the first thing that came out of my brain? No, it was like the 100th thing that came out of my brain. Because I was like, well, it's not this. It's like every single aspect of your life becomes a puzzle that has to be either put together or taken apart, depending on where you're coming at the problem. And it's 9 times out of 10, you're like, what's your problem with weight training? You're like, I hate how my boobs look in a sports bra. What does that have to do with weight training? And in that moment, I was like, well, it is keeping me from doing it. So while it may seem like a stupid problem and a stupid solution, when I got different sports bras, then I could do the activity. So I deeply get the sock thing. And people are like, why doesn't she just walk in the other room to get socks? Well, because then she got distracted by the shelf that wasn't organized in that room. And so she went to organize that. And then she left the room to put something away that was on the shelf. And she went into the kitchen to return that item. And then she was like, oh my God, I have to load the dishwasher. Or, oh shit, I left the tap on.
And then
you guys, it is a very give a mouse a cookie, right? Give a mouse a cookie. Oh, and that mouse smoked a bunch of weed and is like laying around. And you're like, what fucking flavor cookie do you want? And where do I get these? Do I have to go to the bakery? Am I making them myself? That's what's happening inside my ADHD brain. And I didn't realize it until I started taking medication. I was like, holy shit, I can now walk from A to B to C to D in the point of my medication, that part of the day, sequentially. because I used to go from A to W backwards around the corner to F and then get lost. And then I was tired.
What letter was I on? What letter was I on? I think was it B? Maybe it was C. Oh, well,
I
don't know. Maybe I just started at the beginning. I could figure it out.
Right. And why am I so terrible that I can't just do this thing that's so easy for everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Y'all, it's exhausting. So if you are like, shit, this might be me, go, Patricia, where can they find, what is your freebie as a checklist of ADHD symptoms? Tell us more about that, please.
So I always preface with, I'm not a doctor. So go talk to your doctor. But this checklist that I made is it was actually a podcast episode that I originally did. And I like transcribed. Well, I say me, I didn't do it. I have a team that helps me. And this is one of the best ADHD hacks is to have people help you. Like we transcribed it with, in AI, pulled out the key points. My assistant made it into a lovely checklist. Like I wanted people to know that like when you look at the DSM, which is the book that explains all the symptoms for mental health concerns and issues and diseases and what have you. It tells you, like, here's the checklist for ADHD. You need 5 of these 9 things to say that you have ADHD. But in this case, you need 6 of them. And then over here, it's like the map that says you have ADHD or you don't have ADHD. And this is supposed to then create an equal level of care amongst all doctors and, therapists and social workers that can diagnose this. But the problem is when you're looking at a 6-year-old kid and you're like, are they hyperactive? And you see them jumping off the desk, you're like, check. Yes. But when it's a grown-up who's learned how to deal with that hyperactivity, and instead it comes out as like their leg is constantly bobbing in meetings, or they pick their cuticles to the point where they're bleeding, or they're biting their nails, or they're twirling their thumb. The moms that are the mom rock, the constant, like you're rocking a baby, like though that constant movement is not what's on the checklist.
I used to say to people, we'd be in a staff meeting and I'd be in the back moving from foot to foot. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm listening. Because if I was just sitting in my chair listening, the only thing I could hear in my head was, look forward. You're listening. Don't move around.
You look like you're listening?
I totally looked like I was listening, but I couldn't hear a single thing anyone was saying. But if I could sit up and move around, suddenly my ears worked again.
Mm-hmm. But that's not, those examples aren't on the checklist. The checklist is a medical checklist. And so it's very cut and dry. And
meant for children.
Yeah. And more aimed at children because to be diagnosed with ADHD, those symptoms do need to be there for multiple years. Obviously, they're looking at a kid. They want to be able to say, like, yes, this isn't like a last 2 months problem. This is a persistent, over time issue. So when we look back at your childhood, a lot of times people will be like, well, I didn't have all that stuff as a kid. And I'm like, well, but it looks very different in people who are inattentive versus hyperactive or combined type. It looks very different in someone who has learned the coping skills over the last 3 or 4 decades of their life to know how to deal with these things. And people always be like, well, how, they're a lawyer. They can't have ADHD, or you have held a job down. You can't have ADHD. It's like, no, nowhere in the diagnostic list does it say that you're a total fuck up. That's not on the list. Now, does it happen a lot? I would say you're not a fuck up. Like I was like, should I get on the soapbox? Am I going to get on the soapbox?
No, well, I'll just say how I talk about this is that question that came out of that Oprah and Dr. Perry book, which is, what's wrong with you versus what happened to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, there's nothing wrong with me. What happened to me is that I grew up in a world that wasn't meant for me. And I was shamed into a behavior that made me shut down part of who I was and paralyzed me in shame. That's what I did.
Yes.
And being paralyzed in shame is not something that makes you act out. For some. And other people are like, that turns them in the big rebel, right? And what happens when you're a big rebel? Everybody lowers their expectations of you. And so if you happen to pick up a self-soothing substance abuse issue along the way, well, that's just expected because you've always been a fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Patricia, where can people find this checklist? Because I think it's really important, because here's the thing. It was six years after after I'd gone through the diagnosis with my child, who presented in a very classic way, like straight out of the chute, I was like, hello, we have a person who is a life enthusiast that I've seen before as an early childhood educator. We know we got fancy brains over here. But it wasn't until 6 years after her diagnosis, which coincided with the pandemic, a huge loss. Like my best friend died during the pandemic, just the pandemic and perimenopause and menopause. Y'all, that was the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like, okay, apparently my skills are regressing and what is happening, right? And then I started going, wait a second. Because my daughter would talk to me and I'd go, oh, me too. She would tell me things about her life at school. And I'd go, oh yeah, I did that when I was a kid. Oh yeah, I did. And it was like
The light bulb.
I was like, oh, wait a second. Right. But I think your checklist is a great starting point to bring to your healthcare provider, because here's the thing. Most healthcare providers, weirdly enough, have no idea about this, because they too grew up thinking it was 6-year-old boys who had ants in their pants and couldn't sit still on the carpet. And also, it could be your own medical provider that doesn't have the education, but my evaluator, my ADHD evaluator gave me grief about my stuff. And I was like,
cool.
What? Everybody else in the process was great. And then when I finally got beyond the evaluator, he's like, well, I guess. And when I talked to the psychiatrist at the end, he was so kind. So kind. And he said, wow, you've really learned a lot of coping skills over the course of your life. He's like, I see that you wrote a book about self-care. Because I have a big blow up in my office. I was like, I did. He's like, I can't wait to see what happens when you get medication, because you've been working so hard your whole life. I was like, sir, same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I want you to be able to fill out this checklist and see, like, this is how it actually shows up as a grown-up, as someone with more inattentive side. What does that actually mean when we say that you're hyperactive or you're inattentive, that you're having trouble keeping track of things, that you're disorganized? Like, what does that actually mean as a grown-up? And I gave some examples of, like, real life, this is what that means. Like, especially because the symptoms of ADHD are very transdiagnostic, which means they can fit lots of different things. So people who are anxious can also look like people who are ADHD, who can also look like people who have severe trauma. The symptoms fall in, they are on lots of lists.
The Venn diagram is almost a circle for a lot of things.
Yeah. And so when you can then take this checklist and say, hey, Dr. So-and-so, this is where I see the concerns. Like, this is what I'm worried about. Here's how it's affecting my life. And here's the examples of how I can tell you that I'm impulsive. Because the doctor's going to be like, are you impulsive? You'd be like, no, I'm a 40-year-old woman who knows how to, like, make good choices now because I've learned how to do that.
You're like, but do you want to talk about the time I got really drunk in Mexico and did XYZ? And they're like,
yes. Or can I tell you how many things I purchased on, Amazon one click? Like, you need to deactivate that, ma'am. Deactivate. Anyways, like, those ways are the things that I want this to be on this checklist, where you say, like, now I have the confidence and the information to show up and be like, I'm concerned about this. Can you please help me make sense of this? And when you get to the practitioner who's like, there's no way, and you're like, this person's not listening to me. Like, I actually had a really good interview with Dr. David Goodman the other day, and he was saying, like, because I always say, like, if you don't leave that practitioner's office feeling like you were heard, you need to find somebody else. And he was like, well, think about too, like, it's not just that you felt heard, but, like, did they actually ask the questions to get the information? Because some people don't have the best bedside manner. Like, did they really ask the questions to find out? Or did they just assume and not dig in? Because then they're not doing their job. So it's not just that you feel great when you left. Like, did the person really ask the right questions to figure out, is that the answer? When you come in armed with this checklist and you're like, because I see it here, here, and here, then the anxiety won't creep in of, like, and they're like, well, tell me about that. And you're like, and then you just panic, and, like, all information flows out of your brain. I want you to go in being like, I already have my paper here. Also, before you go, take a picture of that paper because you're going to forget that paper at home, which is also another exhibit of how you have ADHD. Take a picture of it.
You're
You take it
also
with you.
likely to miss one of those appointments because
True.
you planned your entire day around it. And then in that moment, had your phone on, do not disturb. And then they did not get a hold of you. And then when you go to reschedule it, they say, of course you did, because I rescheduled this appointment all day long because the people who are calling here think they have ADHD. And it's likely most of them do. And I'm like, I'm so glad you're so understanding. I feel terrible about missing this meeting. And she's like, everyone on that side of the phone feels terrible. And on this side of the phone, we're like, oh, welcome to the club. We know your friends. They're on this side.
Yeah. And like, I mean, for all of my client appointments, like I send a bazillion reminders. I will text you. I will email you. If you're not there 5 minutes later, I don't wait for you to be 15 minutes late to check on you. 5 minutes, I'm like, hey, you come in, we have a meeting. Because I know you're probably like, oh, shit, we have a meeting. Like, I get it. And so like, just show up in 10, like you show up 10 minutes afterwards and we're going to make this happen. That's okay. But I want you to show up knowing that like, it's okay. Trust me, a lot of the people are showing up behind or forgot. And like, can you just not show up ever? And I'm like, well, no, there's still consequences, but I'm going to do my best to make it work for you to actually get here and show up. Because if you come join my community and then you never actually went to any of the meetings, that nobody benefits here. I don't want to be a gym membership where you showed up and like paid the dues and then felt horrible about yourself and didn't ever go again. Like, I want you to be here. So sign up for the text message. Here's the email. Like, get a buddy in the community and like text each other if you need to. Like, what's going to work for you? Because I want you to know, like, I want you to feel at home here and that it's okay to say, oh my gosh, I've forgotten to come to the meeting 3 times in a row. Does anybody have any ideas? And there's the person who's like, well, I set an alarm on Alexa and she does this crazy dance song so that I know it's not just like another timer. And instead it's playing Gasolino dance music. And so then I know that's the meeting and I show up and I can dance my way to my computer. I know that when this song shows up and like, you can't see me because it's a podcast, like we're going to shimmy our way over to the computer and turn on Zoom. And so it's like these kind of things where like, I'm sure you've set 400 alarms and you know what, you probably snooze them all and then ignore them all. So what's the actual solution going to be? Oh, look, these people in this community, they know because they've been there, done that, and already have 16 alarms set on their phone that they ignored. So go get the checklist. Is the moral of the story. You go to my website, motherhoodandadhd.com, go download the checklist. And I have a full, I call it the toolkit of like, it's all the resources that I've made over the years because I have ADHD and I've made a lot of free things on there. So you go sign up for it. And in there is everything from like this symptoms checklist to like ways to calm down when you're losing your crap on your kids to like, hey, how do you actually like, make a packing list when you have ADHD? Like there's just a bazillion resources in there. But I want
I'm going to head over there and download all of them. And I'm laughing because I recently did a poll in my community and everyone is either neurodivergent themselves, married to somebody neurodivergent, is parenting somebody neurodivergent. These are ors or ands, and teaches people who are neurodivergent. I was like, we're in the club all together, friends. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's it. And so and another thing about this idea of you're like, oh, well, I'm not neurodivergent. I don't have ADHD. I don't have this. I don't have that. If we were to say the thing that helps neurodivergent folks, so when I was in a classroom, I tailored my teaching to the neurodivergent folks and everyone in the community benefited.
Yep.
It's called good teaching. I'm going to make shit that seems so obvious to neurotypicals actually be totally visible so that my divergent people might see it. They're like, what? Oh, that's what you guys have been talking about this whole time? So, girl, we are on the same path. And I'm very happy to be there with you. Tell me, so you're coaching, you're podcasting, you're a community leader, you're running retreats. You've got 3 kids, right? 2 kids. How does your own self-care affect your ability to show up in all these different ways?
Oh, I mean, it shows up in everything. And this has been, I think, one of my hardest lessons to learn. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I thought that I could just burn the candle at both ends. Like that was my solution before I was diagnosed. And even at the beginning of being diagnosed, like, well, if I just work harder and I, instead of double check things, I triple check them or quadruple check them. And then I redo it and then I adjust it and then I tweak it. Like the perfectionism was real. And I totally just lost my train of thought.
How does self-care affect your work?
And like, I'm like, don't edit that out because I want people to know, like, when you have ADHD and it's hard to have coherent thoughts sometimes, like, it's okay for us to show up like that and be like, I don't remember what I was saying. Oh, right. Cool. That's what we're doing. Let's go.
Yeah, totally.
We don't have to show up as perfect in order to do things well. And that was my coping mechanism of choice for a long time. And now I've realized after much strife and therapy is that when I take care of myself, everything else is better. Hands down. Especially if I'm showing up as a coach for other people, I can't show up and be present for people when I'm on the struggle bus. I mean, I can and I will. Like, your kid gets the stomach bug and you're up all night. Like, if I'm still like pretty decent, I can still show up and coach you and you're going to get amazing stuff out of it. But if that's my habit, if that is my pattern, that is my everyday, I'm not really doing my best job. So there is a lot of conviction in what I do is that like the reason I developed this, like there's a free video in the toolkit about like 10 ways to calm down when you're losing your ish on your kids. And I call her Medusa Mom. Medusa Mom shows up at bedtime with like all the snakes hissing. Medusa would, if you like looked at her, she would turn you to stone. It's like anyone who looks at mom is like turns to stone. So they're like, run for your life. But when you have little kids, they don't know that and they just take it. And then you're like, I'm scarring them for life.
Money to the therapy jar stat.
Like I made that because I needed that. It was for me. I needed to understand how do I figure out how to take care of myself, especially with, I am running 2 businesses. I am active in my community, in my church. I am on a health journey myself. I've been recovering from mold toxicity for the last 4 years. And all the ways that I am giving and needing to be taken care of, like when I don't take care of myself, it shows. So I have to practice what I preach because when it's coming to a head, I know. And like, it is clear on those days, like my husband's out of town for 4 weeks in a row. And like, I'm just trying to get everybody together to have it. I just want a nice dinner where nobody fights. Like when you start saying those things, when I'm not taking care of myself, like it all goes in the toilet. So I know that this is the key piece for me to keep my sanity is to take care of myself. And like it was highlighted to me yesterday where I meet with a group of, there's 3 other ladies. So there's 4 of us that meet once a month and we're all like small group leaders in our church. So it's like a group to support the leaders. And one of the girls told me like yesterday, my husband was out of town. He's out of town. My kid was homesick from school. We're recording this ahead of time. So like I'm about to release tickets for my retreat. So we're still like, testing all the bugs and making sure all the things work correctly. It's Maycember, y'all. We're recording this in Maycember. It's bonkers. And now I'm supposed to have people over to my house and there's swim practice and we got to go because we have to pick up the swimsuit. It's the day to buy your swimsuit. And it was like, how the heck am I going to get all this done? Now I have a sick kid on top of it. I was already like, whoa, this is a lot. Now I got sick kid and my husband's out of town. So my instinct was like, where do I start to cut things? But what I didn't cut was meeting up with these friends because I knew that this was going to give me life to make it through the next 48 hours where I'm still juggling all the things in the middle of May and I don't have my partner here to support. So I'm not cutting that because I know that spending time with women who I really align with in my values is going to give me the energy to make it through. I love those like deep conversations where it's like, tell me about your deep-seated trauma. Let's discuss. I'm in. Like if you are like sending me to a networking party, that I'm like, ooh, I'm really going to have to like rally my energy here to show up and network and like do the small talk. But if you want to discuss like your dad problems, I'm in. Let's discuss. Dig in. So I'm like, I need this group. And one of the other moms said to me at the end, she was like, I don't know. Like, she was like, I don't understand how, like, you were like, no, y'all, I'm going to make this work. And you were like, I'm not cutting this out. This is not the thing I'm jettisoning today. Because she's like, for me, as soon as things get hard, I cut, talking to my friends or like the things that take care of me. That's the first thing to go. And she's like, I have watched you all year say, I have this thing. I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to try to make it. I want to be there. And she's like, that has changed the way that I look at this, because she's like, this is the thing I would give up when things were hard. And it was really like, it meant a lot, because she's also a mom of a child who has a lot of medical issues, like way beyond like, like lots of hospital stays and surgeries and all that. And she's like, my gut is just get rid of the friend time. So this isn't a mom who's like a stranger to struggle. She's in it. And she was like, that gives me so much life to see you putting that first. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I never thought, if I was really just thinking, they were like, oh my gosh, Patricia's such a hot mess. Why can't she ever show up to these things without drama? And instead she was like, no, this has shown me like, this matters. Like, figure it out, because this time of connection matters. And it's this taking care of you matters. And that is why I continue to put self-care on my list as like, this is the thing I'm not going to cut, because that is how I have the energy to make the good decisions and not lose my shit on my kids. Especially like, to be honest, y'all, I'm coming right up on my cycle. And normally, like, I don't schedule interviews in that, but my cycle shifted. I'm doing, perimenopause and all that nonsense. Like, I was not expecting to be going into my cycle of this day full of interviews, because usually words are very hard and I can't talk like a coherent human. And I'm like, but this matters to me. These are the things that give me life. I could sit here and talk to you for 6 hours and still have more energy. These don't drain me. This is like life-giving to me. So I was like, okay, assuming that words still work, I'm going to show up because this gives me life. Now, if I just have a day where it's like, I literally can't think of the word ball and you're going to have to forgive me, like, okay, then we reschedule. But I can't continue to put myself last, because then I don't have anything to give anyone else.
Totally.
And I don't want to show up like that.
It's like the realization I had early in teaching. And by realization, it was my husband saying over and over, you cannot, no human is capable of sprinting a marathon. And I was like, you're just not trying hard enough. Let me show you. And me learning quickly, but I did that repeated thing, because by by winter break of my first year of teaching, I was like, oh my God, I've given it all. I have nothing else to give. And they want me to do this for 6 more months. How will I do that? I mean, I did it, but let me tell you, I limped for a big part of that. And realizing that time and energy are not the same.
No, they're not.
It is like pigs and construction. They are different. Time is a thing. Energy, it's regenerative, right? Some things suck the life out of you, no matter how long they take. And some things give you energy, no matter how long they take. Yeah. And for me, when I was teaching and motherhood, in my mind, the exact same. That shit is relentless. It is invisible. It is undervalued. It is never fucking done. Nope. And you know what? When you're faced with a thing that's never done, the answer is not work harder, because it is never done. We have to have the wherewithal to go, well, I'm done. I have given everything I can for the day, and I will refresh myself and come back in again tomorrow. Because there is a point of diminishing returns. It comes way faster than we realize. Like, you don't get more done the more hours that you work. You get crappier work the longer that you work. And letting that be okay. Like, we're swimming in this like grind culture. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work for humans. It doesn't even work for machines. It doesn't work for the soil when you're gardening. Like, if machines get to take time off because if you use them too much, you wear them out and they break and you have to replace them. Mm-hmm. What the fuck? Like, I am not as strong as a machine. So I am just saying, I reject that overworking culture because who benefits from that? It's not the people who are grinding.
No.
It's for the people who are making money at the top, and it ain't any of us. So you got one life, take care of yourself. Now we're going to get into the nitty gritty because you and me, I'm a Gen Xer. You are a cuspy. You're a cuspy. What do you call yourself? Some people are geriatric millennials.
Yeah, the geriatric millennials. Because I'm in that space of like 1980 to 80, I think it's 85, where it's like we were in that like where the internet started, where cell phones started. Like I didn't have any of that in my childhood, but in high school is when all that stuff started. So like we got the dial-up internet in high school that was like that beep.
That is one of my favorite sounds. I
All
want
that,
to make that my ringtone. I didn't get that until 10 years later. So like in my late 20s. So it delights me when I hear that. I'm like, that's such a sound from the olden days.
It is. And oh my gosh, I was trying to explain rotary phones to my kids the other day because it was in a so my youngest is in kindergarten and they bring home these like these like early reader books and it was like technology, modern technology or like technology of the future or something like that. But this book was clearly written in like the 90s. And so like all the new quote, air quote, new technologies that this book had was like flip phones. And like they were like showing like the kid dialing the rotary phone and then the kid with the flip phone. And it was like I was dying because when I was teaching 7th grade typing back in the day, I would have to bring in like the floppy disk and then the like the 3-inch and the 5-inch floppy disk and explain to the kids like this is how I took my things to school and if you crumpled it, all your stuff was lost. Like they were just baffled that like I mean, and this is even I was teaching 10 years ago. It's like we had thumb drives. Like there was no cloud. And so anyway, I'm totally getting off on a tangent. It was, what was I supposed to be talking about?
What did you learn about self-care growing up in the pre-internet era?
Yes.
Right? Because then we had like, there was only a handful of channels on the TV. There was a handful of magazines. And so we were really learning from the people around us because we couldn't go on TikTok and find out about mental health. We couldn't go on TikTok and find out about ADHD. We couldn't connect with people that we felt a kinship with because we shared some quirks, right? We had to go, if we wanted to learn something, we're like, shit, I guess I'm going to go to the encyclopedia in the den or go to the library.
And go over there with the card catalog. Like,
yes.
That's how we found things in the day.
Yes.
Well,
so it was a lonely life.
Like the Dewey Decimal System, you actually had to understand because otherwise you weren't finding anything. But I think it's like I think there's pluses and minuses to everything. And when I think back to like childhood in the 80s and 90s, that on one hand, I think it's really wonderful that we didn't have social media and there was no comparing what other people were doing. And I think about, teenagers now who immediately know that they didn't get invited to the thing and they can see everyone's pictures on TikTok or Instagram or whatever the cool thing the kids are using these days. Like, you know that you are at home by yourself and everyone else is having fun. And when I was in high school, you didn't find out that you missed any fun until Monday. And then you knew that the cops showed up. So you're like, "Ooh, I missed that one." And it was okay. But you didn't know that you were missing out in the moment. So I think that part was really wonderful about our childhood. However, you didn't have access to all the information that is here today. And I think back to like, my mom, so I'm one of 5 kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and
what birth order are you? Are you
I'm the oldest.
Oh, you're the old. Okay.
Yes.
We're buckling in for the oldest daughter. Go ahead.
Yes. Enneagram 1, oldest daughter, recovering perfectionist. I tick all the boxes.
I'm an Enneagram 1. Do you wing 2 or do you wing 9? Because I'm like 9. I am not a peacemaker.
I think I might be wing 9. I always thought it was at wing 2, but I think I'm actually wing 9. I'm much more conflict averse than telling people advice they don't want to hear. Younger Patricia definitely told a lot of people advice they did not want nor ask for. Now I see the wing 9 is much more popping up. And also my husband is an Enneagram 1, which is a thing, y'all. And I actually think that he's wing 2 because he'll happily tell you his opinion and what you should do. So I think he's wing 2. All this time, honestly, I thought he was an 8 because he's so bossy, but I think that's the wing 2 coming up. But anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent. What I saw is that like as the oldest of 5, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she loved being a mom. That's all she wanted to do. And my mom had 3 miscarriages before she had me. So I was her rainbow baby, and they were 2 of them were like, I mean, if there's such thing as like an uneventful miscarriage, like it was sad but not traumatic, and there was one that was very traumatic. And so they spent many years, a lot of, I'm sure back in the day, the equivalent of bazillion dollars doing genetic testing and trying to figure out what was going on because my mom really wanted to be a mom. But the way that shaped me is that I watched my mom be selfless. And my guess is like she passed away 20 years ago. So there's a lot of things I wish I could ask her. But I think she was an Enneagram 9 actually. Like she was very conflict averse and she didn't take care of herself. And not necessarily like in a bad way. I don't know that I would necessarily put like a negative connotation on it because I don't know that, like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if she missed out on that or she wishes it was different. I don't know. I don't know. I can't ask her. But she really loved being a mom. And my mom also loved being pregnant. So I thought that motherhood was really easy because my mom made it look easy. But she also was somebody who, like, bought her clothes at Walmart and would buy, the same shirt in 4 colors or patterns. And she was just a very, like, low maintenance, chill person. She was not into, like, she didn't do her hair unless it was a fancy occasion. And she also had really straight hair. So as soon as she walked out of the house with the curls, they all fell out. Like, she rarely ever wore lipstick. Like, she wasn't a girly mom. And I think it made me feel like motherhood was really beautiful. And I think that's part of why I struggled so much when it was so hard for me is that I thought it was gonna be easy. Like, I thought being a teacher that I was gonna be a great mom. Like, I thought that those skills were transferable. Lo and behold, as annoying as some children are in school, none of them will ever compare to the level of annoyance that you can find with your own children.
Where's the paper I co-sign that?
Like, where like, that level of button pushing is reserved for your children. Even, like,
Because they installed the buttons.
they did. It was part of the process of accumulating them in your life.
Mhm.
The button was installed.
It's time to be true to you. You're invited, Mama, to this year's 3rd annual Successful as a Mother weekend retreat. It is time to relax, unwind, rest, and take care of a very important person in the family, which is you. This year's retreat is on October 11th through 13th, 2024, and you're invited. This is an all-inclusive retreat. It covers your meals, your hotel, all of our activities. All you have to do is show up, and I take it from there. We are staying in the historic boutique hotel, the Sam Houston, in downtown Houston, where we will learn about our ADHD, tune in to who you are and what you need so that you can trust your gut. All while eating delicious food you didn't cook, you didn't clean up, hanging out with awesome other moms who are just like you in their ADHD journey, trying to make things work, fill out the permission slips, do all the things, but not this weekend. This weekend you get to relax. I will take care of everything, and you get to focus on you. Head over to my website, patriciasung.com/retreat, and grab your ticket. This is a small group, and we already have 5 moms from last year coming. So I don't have a ton of spots left. Do not wait. Do not procrastinate. When you hear this and you say this is for me, go grab your ticket. You can use a payment plan. I don't charge extra for that. Go sign up, get your ticket, and take a weekend to take care of you while I do all the work. So head over to patriciasung.com/retreat and get your ticket for the 3rd annual ADHD Moms Amazing Getaway Weekend and relax. patriciasung.com/retreat.
And I never saw my mom take care of herself. Like, I never saw my mom do girly things like doing her hair or, she was not a shopper unless it was a grocery store. Like, my parents, I don't think they ever went away, just the 2 of them in my memories. I want to say they might have when I was really little and they only had like 1 or 2 kids at that point. They might have. But like, my parents never went on dates. We rarely ever had babysitters, and it would only be like my dad's Christmas party for work. Like, we didn't go out to eat. Like, my mom made every meal for 7 people for basically until from when she got married until she passed away. Like, I feel like I had this beautiful example of selfless motherhood, but I did not have an example of like, how do you take care of yourself as a person? And I think back to like the resources we did have available. It's like, well, Cosmo magazine and like 17 sure weren't adding to this conversation in a positive way. I just didn't see that. And so I think that's a lot of, people who are in, you're in my generation here and they're, in their 40s and 50s of like this, when we think about like, the self-care of our parents' generation, I don't know that it really was self-care. I think there was some times where they were doing things for themselves, but I don't know that I would necessarily categorize it as the most restorative or the most restful. Like they were doing things for themselves, but I feel like I'm like, and I don't want to sound too judgy, but it's like, it feels like it was bordered more on like the selfishness of like, well, but I want to go do this thing. Not necessarily that it was caring for them and helping them. So I just feel like there wasn't that from my childhood. So when I got to be a mom and I thought like it was going to look like my mom's motherhood and it did not, that was part of the like struggle in realizing like, wow, I'm not cut out. I really felt like I'm not cut out for this. This is not what I expected. I'm not doing a good job of it. And I had to not only figure out actually how to take care of myself, but then also deal with the guilt and the shame that came with like, why isn't my motherhood this like glorious euphoria that I thought it was going to be? What's wrong with me that I don't think this is easy and fun that, I'm like, humans have been feeding their babies like this for hundreds, millions, thousands, I don't know how many years.
You're like all of the years, right?
All the humans managed to survive until the invention of formula in like, what was that, like the 50s? Like, and I can't figure this out. I really struggled with breastfeeding. And it was such a process to accept myself as I was and not what I thought I was going to be. And then learn how to take care of myself in a way that made sense because I literally can't do my best work when I'm struggling this hard. So
I have to say, I have been doing this podcast for 5 years and I feel like, and it may be because I resonate so deeply with so many things that you said, that was a really honest fucking answer. And I really, really appreciate that. And so you took on the story that because your mom was such a great mom and cared for all of you in such a way that you thought, I've got this. I've got this role model. It's going to be easy. And I looked at the way I was raised and I was like, that shit looks hella hard. Why would anyone sign up for that? Mm-hmm. Abso-fucking-lutely not. No. And it wasn't until I was in my late 30s, like my husband and I had a lot of conversations about being child-free by choice for a very long time. I will save you all up. Maybe I will tell you that story at some point. And as it turns out, we did become parents. And I think that there are a lot of skills that transfer from being a teacher to being a parent. But oh my God, the relentlessness of home with a baby, with a toddler, I was like, oh my Lord. I went into motherhood thinking this shit's going to be hella hard. And you know what? It is so fucking easy in the ways I thought it was going to be hard. And it is so hard in the ways that I didn't expect it. And I was like, yeah. So there's no escaping that, oh my God, this is hard because we're different parents because we've never been parents before. And our kids are actually individuals that are not us. Yeah. And if you have more than one, you're like, oh my God, now I have to parent responsibly to the multiple people. What? Yeah. I can't just be like a parent. I got to be a parent this way for that one and that way for this one. Holy shit.
And then we also, as moms, often will then try to manage the relationship between our partner and each individual child, and then all the children between each other. And all of a sudden you went from just trying to figure out how to be a good partner to managing like exponentially more people. The more people that come in, the exponential number of relationships that come in. And no, there's not your responsibility.
There's a fair play card for that.
Yeah. There's a lot that we take on that isn't actually our responsibility and we don't need to manage. But also, like, as the mom, yes, you still have to teach your kids how to all interact in a way that makes sense for everybody. But it is, yeah, I like the way you put it. It's like a lot of the things that I thought were going to be easy were really hard. And I do draw a lot from my teaching experience. There's so much that I get out of like really understanding, I taught middle school, like understanding how kids between like 10 and 13 function. Like I have a lot of wisdom there to offer. And it is very different when I get to spend 45 minutes with you and send you on your way. And then this kid is still here 18 years later. It's a whole nother ballgame.
A whole nother ballgame. Also, the kids at school, they do not see us in our pajamas or before we've had our medication or in the middle of the goddamn night when they get up for no reason.
And then wake you up by sitting by the edge of your bed like
and
out of
stare
a horror
at you.
movie. Yeah. Those are great.
I do that to my mom. So I will say I've been paid back in spades for that. The other thing I wanted to comment on, and I wish I would have commented on this in every other interview I've ever done, and that is we cannot separate our self-care and what we grew up with without also looking at the historical context of what was happening. Because like my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I walked myself to kindergarten. Let's put it that way. I grew up in the Bay Area in the 70s. And you know what? It was a double income situation then. And so, you know, it's like our moms had way less choices than we did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all so contextual. And also, just like our kids are learning what it means to be grown-ups from watching what we're doing, we were learning how to be grown-ups from them. And that's why I asked that question, because it's like, well, if I learned one thing from my parents and the media there and my community, then leads me to the next question, which is, so we kind of didn't learn about self-care growing up. How do we successfully then become grown-ups who prioritize self-care and not just the kind that you can buy at Target?
Yeah.
Right? So how have you added self-care practices? And I'm going to be frank. The reason I'm good at therapy, also good at therapy. The reason I'm good at self-care is because every single therapist I have had from age 10 on through the course of my life has been like, this is how you take care of yourself. If you do these activities, you will feel better. This will improve your mental health. And I was like, you know what? I guess I'm going to try what the medical professionals are telling me versus than what I learned. So what about you? What was the shift? How did you become somebody that now prioritizes deeply restorative self-care for yourself as a grown-up?
I think I became that person because I had to. I'm like, oh, Tami, I might start crying. When I try not to get I try not to share too much about other people's struggles in my family. That's not my business. That's their place to share those things.
Absolutely.
But what I will say is that when I was really struggling, it was this moment of like, either I'm going to figure out how to make this work, or I'm going to become the stories of the other people in my family. And I did not want to become the person who drowned their problems in alcohol. And I did not want to become the person who was recreationally using drugs. And I did not want to become the person who just pretended like everything was fine and just lived miserably. I knew that my choice was either to do all those things that I said I wasn't going to do, or figure out how to make it work. That was the pivotal moment. I don't think it wasn't like this like epiphany moment where I was like, this is it. Dun, dun, dun. Are you going to be becoming them? Or are you going to move like mountains? It wasn't like that movie, like the fancy music goes in the movie and you're like, this is the moment. No, it wasn't that. It was literally like me trying to figure it out and looking around and being like, but I don't want that. I don't want that. How do I not do that? And like, if there was like a pivotal moment, I think it was honestly when my oldest was probably about, I want to say it was like maybe like 2 or 3. And I had just had ingrown toenail surgery, which apologies if that grosses you out, but they they cut your nail to remove the ingrown part so that, and then apologies again, then they like freeze dry the nail bed so it doesn't keep growing in that area. So I have 2 feet that have been are in a lot of pain. And I had gotten into such an argument with my 3-year-old, and he was so mad that he tried to stomp on my feet. And I like looked at him and I was like even telling the story, I was like shocked that like there's this little person acting out so hard that he really wanted to hurt me. And granted, he didn't have any concept of what that actually meant. But I was like, but I contributed to this, and I allowed this situation to escalate to the point where he got to that point, and all of a sudden it was this like out of body experience. And I know now, like for me in parenting, when things start to really go to shit, I have this kind of like out of body experience where I'm watching this situation and realizing like, oh shit, Patricia, you've got to do something different because this isn't it. And I can't always stop myself. Sometimes it still gets worse before it gets better. But as soon as I have, like now that I'm aware of this, when I have that out of body, like seeing the situation from the outside and being like, ooh, this ain't it. We like throw up the red flags, send out the red alerts, like something has to be different. And like I will say, with all the changes that I've made, I think I've had one situation like that probably in the last year. Whereas I think back to the beginning few years of my parenting journey, it was constant. And that moment where I looked at my 3-year-old who was so stomping mad and so out of control that his response was, I want to hurt you. I realized like, this is not how I want to raise my kids. This is not the example that I want them to see, is that mom gets so mad and then I get so mad and everybody's yelling. And I was like, this is not sustainable. And I refuse to be okay with it. And it took me a while. I mean, granted, my kids are old now. It's been many years of work on this. So it's not an overnight thing. And there's still, like I said, there was one recently where I was like losing my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, like it didn't get quite that bad, but it was that moment where I was like, I'm not in control here. And I don't want my kids to grow up and have those memories of like those emotional scars of grownups in their life that they can't trust and are not safe. So what do I need to do to not be that? That's where like, that's why I do it. So when I think about like how do I do this though, is that I do a lot of work with neuroplasticity and rewiring our brains. So like when you're in that moment and you all of a sudden realize like, oh crap, this shit's hitting the fan. Like I got to do something different here. Knowing beforehand what you're going to do in that moment, because when you're in that level of stress and your brain is not online, you have no problem solving skills available to you. You don't know any of those tools.
Dan Siegel calls it flipping your lid. It's like,
yes,
you are fucking cooked.
Yes.
Like nothing. There is nothing good that is coming after this. You gotta get your shit together. You gotta put your lid back on so that you can respond rather than react.
Yes. And so like I do a lot with my coaching to understand like where you are on that stress ladder. And like my therapist was like, hey, nothing good happens after 5. Like on a scale from 1 to 10, if you're past 5, nothing good's happening. And a lot of times we don't know, especially for those of us with ADHD, we don't recognize the signs that we've gotten to 5 or 6 or 7. It's not until we've totally lost our shit at 9 or 10 that we realize, oh, I'm not in a good place. So it's learning. So like, I guess back up. It's knowing what are you going to do in those times, because when you're at 9 or 10, you cannot employ all the brilliant things that you have read or learned or whatever. They're gone and you're in like primal survival mode. The tiger's attacking. You're not going to be like, what did I read in that book last week? No, like the shit's going down. In that moment,
for those of you that are like, wait a second, you're like, in that moment, you are fighting, you are fleeing, you are fawning, or you are freezing.
Those are your choices.
Right? Those are your choices.
Ponder all my toolbox options here.
Yeah.
So when you're in that place and you know what your patterns, you will learn what your patterns are if you don't already know them. Like it's pretty quick for you to know like, well, when things get bad, here's what I do. Okay, well, what are we going to do instead? What's the one thing? We're not trying to, it's not a 10-step process here. What's the one thing that's going to get us calmer so that we can start to move out of that fight, flight, flee, freeze, fawn, whichever one I missed, so that you can start to repair the things. And being able to apologize is a big piece of that. But knowing like what did it feel like when you were at 8 or at 7 or at 5 or even at 4 or 3, so that you can start to recognize that you're on the way to 9 and do something about it when you actually have the capacity to do that. Because
So in other words, I pay attention to the signals in my actual physical body.
Mhm.
Is that one of your processes of like, you're like, oh, suddenly I'm really flushed.
Yes.
Suddenly I'm squeezing my hands. Suddenly,
Yeah.
so are you noticing the physical signals?
Yeah, and everybody's different. So a lot of people are very physically based and they'll notice like my cheeks are starting to get hot or I feel it feels like my chest is getting tight. Like a lot of those signals for people are they're easier to grab onto, but some people are not very somatically aware, especially if you've had a lot of trauma in your background, you may be very detached from your physical self. So in that case, we look at like, well, what are your thoughts doing? Do you hear, like, are there certain phrases you hear yourself saying? It could be you saying it to yourself, or it could be other people saying like those triggering sayings. Is it your internal narrator is now like, Patricia, you're such a fuck up. Like, how could you, you're like ruining your children forever. Like, is that what you're hearing? Are you hearing those intrusive thoughts? Is that what's showing up? Is it like just your thoughts are moving so fast that you can't seem to grab onto any of them? Like, there's a lot of ways that your stress levels show up. And for you, there's going to be some common factors. And to be honest, you don't need to understand all of them. You just need one or two to be like, these are my red flags that something's going wrong. Because if you can recognize that when you're totally lost your shit, like obviously hindsight 2020, then we can start working backwards because you're going to notice those when they're happening at like 7 or 8, they're leading in, and then you get more aware of what's happening at 7 or 8. When you can put a description to 7 or 8, then you can start to understand what 5 feels like. And I do a ton of analogies, especially a lot of people with ADHD are very analogy driven. It's like, you know, when you're feeling like that, like, what do you picture? Do you feel like you are a trapped monkey, like ready to just like bust out of the cage? Do you feel like the weight of the world is a cement block and sitting on your chest? Like, can you put a picture to that so that you know this is what it feels like when I'm starting to lose my shit? Because the earlier you can recognize it, the earlier you can start to do something about it. But then it also comes in the morning of like, in the first half of the day, what are those things that are really draining your energy or making you stressed out that you go from 1 to 5, excuse me, like very quickly? Because on the days where you have to deal with your ornery mother-in-law, there's going to be days where you probably need more care than if you were hanging out with friends at brunch. So what can we do to make sure that you still have capacity after you deal with that? Or like maybe you're like doing taxes and you're like, I hate taxes. It's really draining for me. Because like you said, like time and energy are two different things. And when we think about like the difference between like Kairos time and Chronos time, of like Chronos is chronological. So like, it's been 5 minutes, it's been 10 minutes, it's been 15 minutes. Whereas like the idea of Kairos time is like when you're having a really awesome conversation with a friend and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it's been 2 hours. How it's just gone by in a flash. Or you're like, how is it that I've only been standing here in front of this crowd for 30 seconds? I feel like I'm going to die of a like stage fright. Like that feeling of the time is very real. And that can be used to then restore your energy. So if you know that like sitting down and coloring with your kids before you do homework is going to lower everybody's anxiety, cool. Now we have capacity to actually do homework as opposed to yelling at everybody that they need to start their homework and nobody's doing anything. And then you're just, the whole rest of the night, you're yelling, yelling, yelling. Taking that 15 minutes to have everybody color means that the homework actually got done. Do you feel like you have 15 minutes to color? Absolutely not. But if you don't do the 15 minutes of coloring,
Do you have 3 hours to fight?
Right. Do you have 3 hours to fight with your
we call that
call
that paying the piper.
Mhm.
We're like, we're gonna pay with board games or coloring or TV or a walk or a snack or all of them. And then we're gonna get what we
Right.
want. We buy cooperation with cooperation.
Yes. And a lot of times, like, we feel like we're not being good parents if we don't make sure they do their homework right away. And it's like, no, you know your kid best. You know that if you spend 15 minutes coloring or 15 minutes running around the park, down the street, like whatever it is that your kid needs, and that way everybody's able to get through the evening without, fist fight. Hey, let's make that happen. But it goes for you too as a parent of what are those things that you can do that are going to bring you energy? Just like, I'm like, did I really need to stay up until 10 p.m. chatting with my friends last night? Responsible Patricia's like, no, you should have gone to bed. But I left that conversation just lit up. And I was like, okay, I mean, it takes me a little while to wind down. I was like, okay, run around the kitchen and clean up the disaster from dinner. But then I feel so energized today that was worth it. And so like, we can't just look at like the minutes it cost us. What's the energy that you have to expend or that you gain from that? That's just as much of an important transaction as the 15 minutes that it cost. So
I wish we could get rid of clocks and just have energy meters, because I feel like people, they conflate, they say like there's like, well, if that takes 15 minutes and I'm losing 15 minutes, I'm like, that's actually not how this works. You're taking this 15 minutes so that you get 3 hours of not fighting with your kid back.
Mm-hmm.
I take a 30-minute walk so that I have energy for 3 hours in the afternoon. That's why I'm like, when people fight me on, well, I don't have time, I'm like, the reason you don't have time is because you don't have energy. What you're looking for is you're looking for energy to do your life well. Fuck the clock.
Yeah. And I think I think collectively as a human, we don't quite understand this concept yet, but imagine if everybody was doing the things that really lit them up and that you could do super fast. Like I think about like when I first started my podcast 5 years ago, I was doing all the editing myself. So through episode 17, I did it all myself. And I realized that the perfectionist in me was taking like 4 hours to edit a 15-minute episode. So I went on freelancer.com, found my editor. He's awesome. He still works with me now. So we've been together 5 years. And he can take a 15-minute episode and edit it in like 30 minutes, maybe 45. So what was taking me 4 hours to trudge through, because I mean, I have a basic understanding of it, but I'm not an expert. I don't have any of the fancy programs that like automatically take out the pauses when they're really long. Like I don't have any of that. So I'm manually doing 4 hours of hard work and it's taking me a lot of brain power. Plus I'd be like, ooh, I didn't like how this sounded. I should re-record that. Let me insert. And here it's taking literally 4 hours to do a 15-minute episode. And I send it to Roman and Roman sends it back to me and charges me for half an hour or 45 minutes of time. And I'm like, how many things could I have accomplished if I have 4 hours back, I can do a lot of things to make however much money that is. Let's say it's $20. You know how much stuff I could do to make $20 if I had 4 hours? And I didn't have any of the stress of figuring it out. Why on earth am I spending 4 hours to do this thing I hate when I can pay somebody else $20? I get 4 hours of my life back and I can make money doing the thing that I actually like doing. Like,
yeah.
What is this nonsense? Why?
And you know what's funny? You know what's funny is it took me a few years to hire somebody, because not for the podcast. I've been podcasting for 5 years. Katie, chief of staff, amazing human, my work BFF, has done every single one of these episodes, because I just didn't start a podcast for literally 7 years because I was like, there is zero chance that I want to learn the back end of having to do that. I was like, no. So I guess I can't do a podcast. And then they were like, why don't you just hire an editor? And I was like, again, what seems obvious to other people, I would have never gotten there. And once I did that, I was like, oh my God. And that was exactly it. We're playing to our strengths. I do the talking part. She does the editing part. It makes perfect sense. But again, it's energy. It's not just time. And again, this framework of time versus energy can be applied to your entire life.
Yeah. Like, I mean, right now, as I speak, I'm hiding in the back of the house because our cleaning lady is here. And a lot of people with ADHD, I'm like, this is a really good accommodation for you, is to hire somebody else to clean, because like she can clean my whole house in like 5 hours and it's done. Whereas I would clean the house and then I'm like, oh, look at this picture album I need to put away. Start flipping through pictures. Oh, wait, here's these papers from school that I haven't sorted through. And I start doing that. Like, there's no way I could clean my whole house in 5 hours, even if I tried. Even if somebody followed around behind me and was like, Patricia, keep cleaning. Nope, don't do that, Patricia. Because like, I still would not get the house cleaned in 5 hours. And then I can spend that time doing a podcast interview or, you know, hanging out with my kids. And I can then I could, even if I wasn't doing something fun, even if I could just work that 5 hours and then pay somebody else to do the cleaning, it is still even if it was like a 1-for-1 exchange, like if I was then paying the exact amount that I'm paying her to clean the house, that is a win because I don't like cleaning because I need it to be perfect and then I never finish anything. And I get to the end and I'm exhausted. So the amount of energy that goes to that cleaning is not worth it. Like, not to mention the benefit of like, before she comes, I pick up everything and I'm also squawking at the kids. Put the stuff away. The cleaning
We have to do the pre-clean too.
Yeah, you do the pre-clean, but like my house also stays significantly more organized and things get put away because she can't clean if the stuff is everywhere. But it happens every 2 weeks. So it doesn't get to the like pile, like the monumental pile where you can't do anything about it. No, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of piles on my counter right now because it's Maycember and there's all kinds of projects and junk like piled up. But like she can move one pile over and clean the counter. Like I don't like doing that to her because I'm sure it's harder for her. But like even if I have everything in a pile on the counter, it's not on the floor. It's not in my car. It's not on the kitchen table. It's not in their backpacks. And it is maintained over time. Is it perfect? No, like my house definitely does not look like you. That was like, this room looks nice because I knew I was recording a bunch of interviews today because she's here today. I was like, I got to be in this room. So like all the junk is hidden. But like that exchange is worth it hands down every time. And so like when you're talking to your partner about like, how do we make this better? Like I still remember when I was pregnant with my oldest, I was so sick. I threw up for 7 months with my first, all 9 months with my second. So like when you're throwing up that much, now you only have 2 kids. I was like, I can't do this. I told my husband, I was like, our house is starting to fall apart because I'd be on the floor vomiting for hours. And I was like, I can't do it all. I can either keep up with the house or I can cook. Or what was the other one? Keeping up with the house, cooking, and then at the time, my second, we had, the older one. So, and I can care for this kid, but I can't do all 3. So which 2 are we sticking with here? And so obviously the kid was non-negotiable. So he's taking care of them was one. And the other one was keeping up with the house stuff. So my second pregnancy, I hardly cooked at all. We picked up, or my husband would figure out the cooking. That was not on my job responsibilities while I was pregnant. I'm like, I can't do it. So when you have those conversations with your partner, like, how do we as a team figure out the solution? If you're like, well, I don't have $100 to pay somebody to come to my house. Okay, cool. Is there something else that you can swap that for? Like, we often have pockets of money that are not really being utilized as much as we could. Like the amount of pleasure I get out of not cleaning my house is pretty high. So I will do a lot of other things myself so that I don't have to give up my cleaning lady. I will take that trade. There was a time where I gave up pedicures. This is back in my 20s before I had responsibilities. I gave up pedicures so that I could save for my first house. Because I was like, I was willing to cut this thing that I loved, especially because I would go with my friends after when I was teaching. Well, all the teachers would go together once a month on Friday after school. It was a thing. I didn't want to give that up. But what was more important to me at the time was saving for my house down payment. So when I look at that, especially with ADHD, like we have to know why. I knew that giving up the pedicures was because I wanted a house. Like I wanted to start my investment company. I was, I bought it, I renovated it, I flipped it. Like I wanted that more than I wanted pedicures. And in those times, it's a whole lot easier to say I'm not doing the pedicure because I want this other thing more. So it's the same thing. I want someone cleaning my house because I really hate cleaning my house and it takes me forever and I never get it done. So what am I willing to give up to be able to make that happen? A whole lot, let me tell you. In those times where we've had to cut back, it's never been the cleaning lady.
Well, exactly. And I have to tell you, like my husband was super resistant. He is neurotypical, but he was still very resistant to hiring a cleaning team. And his thing was like, but we can do this. And I was like, okay, well, you're right. We can. But here's the thing. We don't do it to the level that they would do it. So I just made a very comprehensive list of every single job like white bathroom counter, suite bathroom. Like I listed it out room by room by room by room. And I was like, highlight the half that you're going to do. Tell me the day of the week it's going to be done. And he was like, I don't want to do any of this. And I was like, well, neither do I. But these are the things that need to be done. So either we're splitting this, pal, because I am not the only person that lives here, or we're going to bring in somebody for our family success team. We're going to spread our teacher money, our wealth, and support another female-owned business to have them do work in their area of expertise. Or we're going to split it. And he was like, this job sounds terrible. Let's find somebody. And I was like, cool. It sounds like we have a lot in common in that we have a lot of things going well in our self-care because we're like, hello, this is a matter. I don't want to just survive this life. I want to thrive and I want to help other people do that too. I feel like we have the same mission in life and in our work.
For sure.
What area of your self-care at this point, this many years in, are you like, oh, I see you over there. You need a little attention.
Ooh, right now it's the movement category. So I've spent the last 4 years healing from mold toxicity. And when I was really sick, I was bedridden. Every time I stood up, I would get dizzy. I had POTS, if you're familiar with that. And I really struggled health-wise. And my blood pressure was extremely low. My blood pressure was about 85/50. And so just, most people don't stay alive when their blood pressure is that level. Like maybe some 88-year-old lady could make it, but that's about it. Like it was really bad. But given that, I was not doing any physical activity because I couldn't even walk up the stairs without getting extremely winded and like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out and black out. So this 4-year journey has been a beast and I'm happy to still be alive. But now that I am in a place where I can do things, like I've been doing my physical therapy exercises to, I had symphysis pubis dysfunction with my youngest, which if anyone's unfamiliar, it means that your ligaments don't go back in place after pregnancy around your hips. So like your hips are designed to expand to be able to get the baby out of the birth canal. But then after your hormones cause them to stretch so that the baby can't exit, then when the hormones stop, it's supposed to go back together again. Well, mine didn't. So my hip bones were wiggly. So they were not stationary. So that was a lot of back trouble, which hypermobility is often very common with people who have ADHD, so now that I know a lot about it, no surprise there. But so I've been doing a lot of physical therapy exercises to strengthen my core and get my body to do things like walk correctly. Just FYI, didn't know I wasn't walking correctly. I didn't walk correctly. And now it's at the point of like, okay, I am healthy enough that I can start doing these things again. So it's like, ooh, but as a mom, you're like, now I got to figure this out. Like I have to figure out where does it go in my schedule? It's all the questions of like, well, where do I go? Who am I going to go with? Do I need to sign up for a class? Do I need to do weights? And like that overwhelming decision has been like sitting on the back burner of like, I'll get to that later. So that's been the one thing where I'm like, it's very apparent that is now, it's moved from being I was putting it off because it felt scary. Like there was so long that I couldn't do physical activity because I would get so sick. That now it's like, okay, that's not me anymore. And I've had to change my mindset around being a sick person and being a disabled person to now I am capable. So now that I feel like I'm like, okay, I think I've almost adjusted back to being a healthy individual again from in my mind. Now it's like, ooh, how am I going to make that work? Because it's not an overnight thing. It's a monumental decision. It's not like one thing. Like we talked about earlier, it's like there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And I know that I need to then make probably like 15 to 30 decisions in order to make this happen. So like setting aside the time to be like, okay, this is now a priority. How am I going to make this work? It's not just what day of the week I'm going to do it, but it's all the questions that come in with it of like, same thing. I'm like, I don't even know if my exercise clothes really fit anymore. Like I went from being a size 10, 12 down to a 2. I gotten down to 130 pounds. I'm almost 6 feet tall. So I was in rough shape. I lost 100 pounds total from when I was pregnant down to when I was my lowest. Now I'm back up to about where I was at a size 10, 12. So I'm like, I don't even know if I have those clothes anymore. I'm going to have to go shopping. Like it's a whole thing. And to know those are all different kinds of tasks. So it's not like I can just jump in and do them all at once. I now know like how my brain works is that I need to divide them into groups and be like, okay, problem number 1, where's the time to be able to do this? Problem number 2 is like, well, where's the activity that I can fit in the time that I have available? Problem number 3, do I have the clothing that is appropriate for this activity? Number 4, how do I sign up for those things? Like, compare the pricing and the memberships. It's like all these different sections I need to sit down and look at as separate projects, not as one big scary project. And then I'll be able to figure out how to make that work. So that is the next self-care to-do list item, is to break that down so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
So I have 2 things to say. So I am your future, meaning that since I am a decade ahead of you, one thing that I think is absolutely shit about the human experience is that movement is so non-negotiable. When you're young, you can do whatever the hell you want with your body. And you can do nothing. You can rot in your bed and you will get up and run a marathon. You can go to work drunk and be fine. In your 50s, you're like, do I have to do PT in order to stretch, in order to exercise so I can get out of bed? It's insulting how the future just punches you in the nose and goes, I gave you all this time, I gave you 50 years to figure this out. And now it's non-negotiable. And it's like, but you know what would have been really more effective human experience is if I had gotten these consequences earlier in my life, I would have figured this shit out.
Yeah.
So that
I don't know how good you have it when your body just does what it does. Like when your body literally would just do whatever you expect of it is such a luxury and a gift that, having been so sick, I'm like, people
and
who
a privilege
are healthy
of you're like, what? I had no idea how much a privilege I was living in with a functional body, right?
Yes, it is
And
definitely
also,
a privilege.
Do you use Goblin Tools?
No.
Okay, well, you need to look at Goblin Tools, because Goblin Tools is an AI tool where you go, ADHD, you put in your problem and it gives you steps and it tasks them out.
Ooh.
And then you could, oh my God.
Yeah,
And then it'll give you steps. And if it hasn't broken the steps down enough for you, you can break down each individual step and it creates a checklist. Play with it. And you might go, oh my God, that totally worked for my brain. Or you're like, oh, that's whatever. But I have put in some things that I'm like, because that's one place where I struggle is breaking big things down, not concepts, but projects. I'm like, damn it. What is the process?
Yeah, I definitely thought I could do this project in like 2 days. And then you look at the to-do list, you're like, this is like a 10-week project, Patricia. This is not a 2-week project.
Yeah. And you're like, if I don't eat or sleep, I could totally bang this out. But anyway, try that tool and let me know how it works for you. What's your morning routine?
So I have different morning routines depending on if my husband's around or not. And I think that's also something that's important to know. Like, you don't have to have one end all be all routine. Like, our school days when my husband is here look different than the school days when he's not here. And they look different from the weekends. And I know that makes some people be like, how am I going to have 3 different routines? Well, just
it's being responsive, right? You're like, my reality today is this.
Yes. But also you already have a routine. You may not like it, but you have a routine. There's a way that you already do things. And you might be like, this is not good, but you have one. So you are capable of having a routine. If you don't like the word routine, call it a rhythm, if that tastes better to you. But I am not a morning person. So right now, my morning routine is drag my behind out of bed when I need to, like when the kids are getting up. So I have Alexa runs our mornings. Oh, wait. Okay. So you never know, like if you say the word and then all of a sudden she starts talking. I'm like, shh, now I know. She runs our mornings. So she's like, hey, it's time to get up. I have an alarm that goes off. A little bit of head, but I used to be the person that has like 73 alarms, but they drive my husband bonkers. So our new agreement is I don't have all those alarms that go off in the morning and then he'll wake me up, which does not work for everybody. But when he's here, he does that. When he's not here, all 73 alarms are going off. And I have one that goes off when the kids need to get out of bed. And then Alexa in their room is saying, hey, it's time to get up. It's, get your clothes on. Have you gone potty yet? And like, you need to word it in a way that your kids aren't going to be like, rebellious towards her, but they are significantly less rebellious to a robot than you. So she tells them what to do and keeps them on time. And so while they're getting dressed on a day where they actually get dressed, and like we still have our baby monitors hooked up. Like I'll listen and be like, are they actually awake? Like, they don't need baby monitors anymore. Like, they're way past that. But it's for me to be like, we live in a 2-story house. I'm like, I don't want to run all the way up there if they're fine, you know? And then, like, when he's not here, as long as I can hear that they're getting ready, all I do is I take my ADHD medicine and I go potty. That's it. And you know my mom when I said I go potty and then I can go to the bathroom. I go potty and then I take my medicine and that's it. And we go and, I feed them breakfast and get all this, like the last minute things, because we pack backpacks the night before, get all the last minute things in the backpack and then brush their teeth. And I will literally throw on like something that looks like not a pajama over top the pajamas to walk them to school. And then I come home and do the things for me. When my husband's here, he starts getting them started. I will actually put clothes on, but like I don't usually like brush my teeth and wash my face, all that stuff. Like that's not until they're out the door, because I am not a morning person and I don't want to wake up any earlier than we have to. Also, our school starts at 7:20 right now, which is very early for elementary school, in my opinion, personally. So I get them out and then I take care of me. So from 7:15 to 8 is my time to be like, okay, I'm going to have my quiet time. I'm going to pray. I'm going to wash my face and brush my teeth. And, if I'm going to scroll some stupid social media for a couple minutes, like all that happens in that 45 minutes. If I'm doing my physical therapy exercises, like that's the time for that. And then at 8, that's when my day starts. But I don't have this like glorious routine of like 5 a.m. yoga stuff. Like I teach how to do morning routines. Like you can learn that from me. I have a class. It's $97. Like, but I want you to know that like, it's not because I'm like, yay, let's go yoga, 5 a.m. No, my morning routine is for the people who are like, my alarm clock is the toddler who's now bonking me in the head because I need to get up and they're hungry. Like that's who my morning routine course is for. How do we get through this part of the day that I don't like? And then I can go be a human once my medicine is kicked in and my children are out the door. Now I'm like, okay, cool. Now let's go wash the breakfast dishes. But I'm not doing that at 6:30 in the morning. That's not my thing.
I love that. And it's funny because I am a morning person. So I guess that's why I'm like, oh, what do you all do in the morning? But if you ask me what I do from like 5 p.m. until bedtime, I'm like, lay in my bed and watch TikTok until the time has come for everyone to go to bed. So we just do the same thing at the other end of the day, right? It's like my energy, I'm a rooster. I am ready to go. Sun up, sunrise, 365 days a year over in this brain. I love that. Patricia, please tell us again where we can find you when we want to find your podcast. We want to find all your free resources. We want to find your ADHD symptom checkoff list. Where are people going to find you online?
So everything is Motherhood in ADHD everywhere. So it's like that.com for my website. You can see there's like a start here tab. Click there. That'll take you to all the free resources. My podcast is called Motherhood and ADHD. All my social handles are the same, although I am taking a social media break right now. My assistant's posting things for me, but I've been taking a break and it has been glorious for my mental health. I'm going to be honest. And yeah, go on there, grab as many free resources that make you happy. And then if you're like, hey, this chick sounds like my kind of people, I have a community. We meet every Wednesday and we spend half the time getting some shit done and figuring out like what's coming up in your week. What do you need to look ahead for? Because we tend not to look ahead. When we have ADHD, we just live in the now. And we're like, what do you mean there is this thing next week? So we do that. And the second half is social time. Or sometimes I teach like a little mini class on something, but mostly it's about the time with the other moms and getting to know other people who get you. And like, so you can have, the kind of conversations that Tami and I have of like just digging into your people. And then I have a retreat coming up in October. If there's still tickets available, come sign up. We're going to hang out for the weekend and I take care of you. You literally get to show up and do nothing responsible. It's retreats. Glorious.
Where are you holding the retreat?
In Houston.
In Houston. Good to know.
Which is where I live.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. We have 10 quickies. Are you ready for the quick fire?
Okay, ready.
Challenge questions. We're doing this super fast because you already know a lot of this.
Okay.
Patricia Sung, what is your Enneagram? We've already discussed it.
We're
one sisters. Introvert, extrovert?
Introvert.
I wish you could see Patricia's face. And as somebody who's spent time with you at the end of the day, we're both like, and scene. Done. Good night.
Yes, exactly.
Upholder, questioner, obliger, or rebel?
Questioner.
Same. Automate, eliminate, delegate something from the house, or your business?
Everything that doesn't require to be me.
Right. I call that empowering the people around me to stand in their leadership. Some people call it being lazy. Usually it's children. I did have a student say, "You're the laziest grown-up I've ever met in my life." And I was like, "You're welcome." You feel very good
Take
about
notes,
yourself.
child. Take
Yeah, congratulations. If a kid can do it, they should do it. I'll handle the stuff you
Yes.
guys can't do. Favorite last book that you read? The most recent book where you're like, shut the front door. Everyone has to read this.
Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Is that
Don't
the one
ask
with
me the
the
author. I have no idea.
Was that the one with the octopus on the cover?
Yes, the octopus.
Okay.
I just read it for book club.
Awesome.
I also just read I Who Have Never Known Men, which is like a sci-fi kind of. I didn't know. A friend recommended it. I did not know what I was getting into. It was not what I expected, but it really was thought-proprovoking.
Oh, I love that.
It was weird.
And I've never heard of it.
I'm not really a big sci-fi person, so like I would never have picked that book myself. But I thought, I mean, I checked it out from the library because my friend recommended it, and I was like, "This is deep." It's not what I thought it was going to be.
Okay, I love that. And I also love giving that idea of like, well, I'm going to get it from the library. And if I like it, I like it. If I don't. No harm, no foul. But it is curious to find out what other people find fascinating. Also, P.S. started a podcast. So basically I have this giant reading list. Favorite book of all time?
To Kill a Mockingbird.
We're going to take a moment for Harper Lee. I did not read that book until I was in my late 20s. I don't know how, but on the middle of the first page, I thought, shit, I get why this book is a classic.
I mean, I read it in high school, and I grew up in a small Midwestern suburb where like you could count the number of minority people on one hand. And so I really had never been exposed to anyone different than me for most of my childhood. And that book just opened my eyes to be like, wow, there is so much that I don't know, but also that I would like to learn. And like, here we are now, I'm in an interracial marriage, and who would have known I'd end up here?
Hey,
but
and I grew up in one of the most diverse areas in the country, and I was so moved by the injustice all the way around. But the writing just itself, and it's so brief and okay.
Yeah.
Your favorite personal development book. And I define personal development as a book that when you read it, you thought, oh, I am going to use the exercises in this book and I am going to change something about my life.
Oh, man. So I read a lot of these, and I have recently taken to not reading any more books by old white dudes for instruction.
Or high-fiving on so
I'm
many
like-
levels.
So, like, there's, because I mean, the other thing is, like, I think of like immediately the first book I came up with is also by, I'm pretty sure he's a white dude. I don't think he's old. It's called Come Up for Air. But I was like, no, I'm really tired of promoting old white dudes or just other white dudes. Like, yes, I'm not saying what's in your book is not valuable, but a lot of times it's not written from the perspective of people who are caregivers. And there's so much that's not taken into account when that advice is like, doesn't consider the fact that you have other people to consider. And it's not just do whatever works best for you. So that being said, if I was going to pick a white dude book, which I think is that guy, I feel like I really should have looked that up before I said that. My favorite, I've read so many. I'm like, oh my goodness, there's so many to choose from. But I would say out of all of them, I think Nedra Tawwab is awesome. And her books on boundaries, both of them are excellent. And I would like to promote more women, more people of color. Like, I want your advice. The people who actually had to struggle to get there, I'm not saying that people don't have struggle. Old white Jews, I'm sure had struggle too. But like people who really struggled, I want your advice. I want to know what it took to get where you are, because like that's the kind of advice that I want in my life, are the people who get it and like really struggled. Like another one I can think of is like 6 Figures in School Hours. I think it's like Kate Toon, I think was her name. Like books that are aimed at moms by moms. I don't want somebody who's never had like a sticky-handed 3-year-old in their vicinity while they're trying to get something done tell me how to do it. Because I'm like, I'm pretty sure if I stuck this toddler in your office, you wouldn't get anything done either, bud. So,
No, I mean, and I have to tell you, I am 100% behind you on this. And is it Nick Sonnenberg?
Yes.
This?
Yes, that book.
Okay. I agree. I mean, Michelle Obama wrote about it, this exact phenomenon, which is, hey, if you're at the pinnacle of your profession, there is an invisible architecture scaffold underneath your success. I love the book Essentialism, but I'm like, hey,
Me too.
author,
But also, yes.
who's taking care of your kids?
Mm-hmm.
So
The same thing, like the one thing or the big leap.
all of it. Who's taking care of your kids?
Yeah.
Who is the favored parent of all the people who are ornery and awful and need to be taken places and are constantly asking for food?
Yeah.
Like as recently as this morning, my daughter said, she has a doctor's appointment later, and she goes, why don't you just let me stay home? And I was like, because I will get nothing done. And she's like, I won't bug you. And I was like, that is hilarious. You will interrupt every single thought I have with a question that you find urgent. Or if you're not currently interrupting me, I will anticipate you interrupting me. So no, ma'am, you're going to go to school for the first half of the day. I'll pick you up at lunch for your doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
So actually,
I also just read, I always say the wrong word. So I'm like, this is an ADHD thing. I'm like, I keep picturing, oh, that's what it is. Okay. Unapologetically Ambitious by Shelley Archambault was really good too. She's a mom who was one of the, I think she was the first African-American tech CEO, like in Silicon Valley. And for some reason, I always want to say audacious instead of ambitious. And every time I'm like, Patricia, make sure which A word is it? Because they're both good. Her book was really good too, especially from the perspective of like a mom who was a CEO and also like just busting through so many hurdles and stereotypes. Like, again, that's the advice I want. I want the mom who did it under like the circumstances where everyone else said she couldn't. That's the advice I want to follow.
Absolutely. And so when I hired my first business coach, I hired somebody who had 3 kids, she had a set of twins, a kid a few years younger, and she only ever worked part-time and still was making 6 figures. I was like, that's the person I would like to learn from, because I learned the words early in my career, which is begin the way you wish to continue. I would like to work part-time. I would like to have a lot of time to take care of myself, my friends, my family, my community, the world. And I would like to make hella full-time money. That's the person. I don't need the like rise and grind and no, thank you. Okay. Social media channel where you like to hang out, not as a professional, but as a person.
I mean, I guess Instagram, but I deleted off my phone probably, how many months ago was that? It was in October.
Nice.
So I mean, like I'll go peek in every once in a while, but like basically I don't go check it until my assistant says, hey, you need to go read these messages. Then I go read the messages and I respond. But otherwise she monitors it all, so I don't get lost in there. So I would say Instagram with the caveat that like I only go in there when my assistant tells me I need to go in there. And then I try to avoid it otherwise, because otherwise I get sucked in until many hours of Instagram.
Yeah, I hear you. Favorite TV show, past or present?
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I like that. I don't know why you're asking as a question.
Well, I was trying to think of like something I saw more recently. I don't watch a ton of TV these days. Yeah, that just brings out like really happy college memories back. Yeah.
Love that. And finally, last but not least, our actual end of our interview question, stolen directly from James Lipton. Patricia Sung, what is your favorite swear word?
Oh, it's really hard to pick one. I would say I probably say shit the most. Yeah.
As in, shit, I forgot. Shit.
No, like,
Acted.
yeah, but more like, oh, I'm losing my shit. What is that shit? It's more of a.
You're like, I can't. You just like,
noun? What is the shit? I'm losing. It's more of a noun. I use it. I prefer its usage as a noun.
Yeah, I like that. All right, friends, go over and check out motherhoodinadhd.com. You can find Patricia's podcast wherever podcasts are found. You may even find me as a guest on Patricia's podcast, talking all things about late diagnosis and how fair play and ADHD families can be besties. And until next week, remember that you matter too.
more resources, classes, and community, head over to my website, motherhoodinadhd.com.